You no longer have to be a senior FBI agent with extensive experience to help lead the nation's law enforcement agency. Breaking with tradition again, Trump has made it crystal clear that he prefers loyalty over experience. And podcaster Dan Bongino is his choice for Deputy Director of the FBI.
Bongino is a former New York City police officer and Secret Service agent before he became a conservative podcaster. The announcement was made by Trump on Truth Social on Sunday. Great news for law enforcement and American justice. Dan Bongino, a man of incredible love and passion for our country, has just been named the next Deputy Director of the FBI by the man who will be the best ever director, Kash Patel. Dan has a master's degree in psychology from CUNY and an MBA from Penn State.
In the Friday episode of the Dan Bongino Show, titled The Golden Age of Republican Politics, there was a segment on Kash Patel. Let's listen.
Thank you for getting Kash Patel through. Kash Patel is there for one reason. He is there to make the FBI great again. Folks, if we do not have a credible deterrent to spies in this country, counterintelligence, to terrorists that are planning plots here openly, some coordination entity for both transnational and interstate crime, we're not going to have a country. Kash is committed to that and that only.
Reactions are pouring in on social media from all sides. Charlie Kirk wrote on X, "Wow, breaking, great patriot, dear friend Dan Bongino has just been named Deputy Director of the FBI. This is incredible news. Thank you, Dan Bongino, for the sacrifice. I know this is in service to our country. America just got a huge upgrade."
Journalist Mehdi Hassan, a big favourite of Robbie's, wrote on Blue Sky, "Imagine if Joe Biden had made one of the Krasenstein brothers Deputy Director of the FBI. That would have been a way less controversial or outrageous move than making Dan Bongino, a man too extreme for Fox, Deputy Director of the FBI."
Benny Johnson wrote on X, "Throwback, Dan Bongino on possibly being put in charge of a special task force to reform the Secret Service. The boss calls and asks you to serve your country. You do it." He has now been named Deputy Director of the FBI. Congratulations, Dan Bongino.
NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian wrote on X, "Traditionally, the Deputy FBI Director has been a career FBI agent. That is particularly important when the director has no experience at the FBI. Donald Trump today announced he is appointing as Deputy Director Dan Bongino, a former Secret Service agent and prolific conspiracy theorist. He has never spent a day working at the FBI, but he has spent many hours spouting baseless falsehoods about the Bureau, such as that the FBI lied when they said they don't have a suspect in the pipe bombs outside the RNC and DNC on January 15th, 2021. Current and former FBI officials are appalled and extremely concerned for the national security of the country."
Dan Bongino, I suspect, is not one of your favorite people.
Don't tune in to the Dan Bongino Show on a regular basis, I must say.
I do not. I occasionally see his clips across my social feed, and this is going to be a case where I recognize that he is an extremely controversial figure from a mainstream perspective, and for all I know, he believes and says things that I don't agree with or think are too extreme. I have not seen very many of those clips, and usually when I see him talking, he's saying something I agree with, but I'm not putting out there that that's the extent of what he has to say. But why does this person particularly irk people of a more liberal persuasion?
For two reasons, I think, primarily. One is he doesn't have any experience that seems tantamount or appropriate to holding that job. And so I think people basically see this as Trump's propensity to sort of govern by trolling, or to put trolls in absolutely very sensitive positions. Kash Patel is similarly in that category, writing books where he sort of has an enemies list at the end of them and indulges in all sorts of conspiracy theories.
Well, but isn't that a different argument against Kash? I mean, Kash Patel is, I think, qualified, sir, for the job. He has a background in law enforcement and actually worked as a defense attorney for a number of years, which I think is a worthy skill.
I think it's a very worthy skill. I'm not sure that it qualifies you to be director of the FBI, which is not traditionally where that role has been drawn from. I don't think that his background, such as it is in those areas, is a qualification for that particular task. But more to the point, in Kash Patel and Dan Bongino's case, the problem is not whether their resume qualifies them. It's whether their resume disqualifies them, in the sense of both propagating false claims about the 2020 election being stolen, both making incendiary claims as a matter of course, both expressing sort of glee, the famous Dan Bongino quote about 2018, "My entire life right now is about owning the libs." Do we want, so whether you want to own the libs or not, do we think that that is really an appropriate person to be running the main law enforcement agency in the country?
Yeah. I mean, it's reflective of Trump's preference for picking very bombastic, conservative personalities from TV and radio.
And kind of henchmen, though, Robbie, no?
Yeah, I mean, this is the Trump plan, the criticism of the FBI and other government agencies is that they are not reflective of or implementing the will of the elected president. That's what Kash Patel is ostensibly empowered to do.
This is where we get, I think, in the sort of philosophical disagreement. It's not their job to implement the will of the president. It's their job to implement the law. That's the issue. And so whenever you talk about implementing the will of the president, whenever the current president's will has included going after people who he believes have wronged him, the whole point of having an independent law enforcement apparatus is that you don't just, it's not just weaponized for a president's personal vendettas.
Well, I agree with that, and it should not be weaponized for the president's personal vendettas. But again, the conservative critique of the FBI is that they would say it was weaponized previously to go after, political opponents of the system. And I think you can point to the FBI doing just that in terms of the FISA surveillance of Carter Page, a surveillance that I have written about and discussed on Rising as, in my view, having been totally inappropriate, and the subsequent review of that having found that the warrant was granted over and over again with very little validity to it, or very little reason to suspect he was a legitimate subject of this inquiry. That was something that Kash Patel, in his role as working with Devin Nunes, I believe, in the House Intelligence Committee, had a role in exposing that kind of what conservatives would say was deep state malfeasance against a political opponent or a political person within the Trump orbit. So if it's about fixing the weaponization, not redirecting the weaponization to be against the enemies of Trump, I don't want to do that, but fixing the weaponization. Sometimes I think liberals or Democrats talk about these institutions as if they were totally neutral and they're just acting in good faith, and Trump is trying to make them political. But what many conservatives believe, sometimes I think wrongly, but sometimes, like in the case I just outlined, correctly, that this neutral system is actually targeting them.
But firstly, I fundamentally disagree with that. The Carter Page thing was a admittedly controversial element within a broader picture where even the people who looked into that believed that the overall investigation into Trump had legitimate justification. Yes, it ended up in the Mueller report, which was we'd get into the Mueller report again. It was inconclusive, I would say. But the point about it is that the overall investigation, Crossfire Hurricane, was launched on legitimate grounds, broadly speaking. Now, in terms of the weaponization of the Justice Department, I just don't at all accept the argument that that there was anything during the Biden administration that was as you have characterized it. And I think that the charges ultimately laid against Trump were justifiable charges in all 4 of the criminal cases in which he was indicted.
Well, let us know what you think. Next up, Zelensky won't cave to POTUS's demands. What's his latest idea? We'll talk about it. Stay tuned.